Hello, May Day 2020. We've got our flowers, so I hope you've got yours. Welcome aboard Pride of Baltimore 2 and Coffee with Captain Jan Miles. That's me, down below on the Pride of Baltimore, here in Baltimore. So, what do we got, Jeff?
Chief Mate Jeff Crosby here behind the camera. Good morning, everyone. The first question is in from Keith Hopkins. What would you recommend for a novice who is familiar with charts to study to gain knowledge into navigation, both past and present?
Well, never been asked that question before. So, if you're familiar with charts, you can gain more information in a lot of places. With the internet, there's just streams and streams and streams of resources, online learning. When it comes to a printed material, the Bible in the United States is the Practical Navigator by Bowditch, which is published by the government. And it has everything, the most modern of navigation as well as the most basic. So from celestial to satellite and there's more than one kind of system there. Then you get into the business of horizontal navigation, piloting. It's all there. So get yourself a Practical Navigator, the Bowditch, but also go online. And then in the end, it's only doing that teaches you. You've got to do it. Practice doing it.
When it comes to navigation, what do we use on Pride for navigation?
Well, we mostly do what every modern boat does, and that is follow a system of tracking our position via GPS. Mm-hmm. We back it up with visual cues such as a radar ranging and bearing, or visual sight bearing. We do carry celestial navigation equipment. We use a lot of things. We have at hand a lot of things, but for the watch leader, it's largely a matter of organizing, copying down lat long, and then plotting it, or with digital charts, seeing the position on the digital chart. So there's a lot of distance in terms of the personal action of navigating. I grew up long before the digital, so I still use in my mind and in my planning a lot of the parameters that I learned when the digital wasn't there, when the satellite navigation wasn't there. So it's interesting to work with watch leaders who are only thinking in terms of, if I write this down, that's a record. And that's important because maybe the electronics will go out. Mm-hmm. And we do carry paper on board. But then that's the only thing that they're sort of seeing. Now they might learn more about the horizontal with the use of radar. Radar is actually a great tool for teaching about the horizontal navigation. It's not the only tool by any means, because you've got the visual. We have a great ship's compass whereby you can gain a bearing almost 360 degrees, clear visual, and then you can take that and plot that and get a 3 bearing, visual bearing position on the chart and plot that on paper. You can actually do it electronically as well, because the electronic charts offer range bearing tools that you can use, and put that down as a way of backing up the concept of the GPS, which is very accurate, but it's a way of verifying. So we do a lot of this. We have all this variety and capability. For instance, at Anchor Watch, we're using a hand-bearing compass to verify positions after dark.
Yeah.
And that's not so much plotted as they're established. And if the bearing numbers are getting out of whack, there's a consultation with the watch leaders, which might lead to a consultation with the captain because things are not looking the same as before. So we use all the equipment, all the styles.
When it comes to electronic navigation, what's the program that we've used, and what's been your experience with our software versus other softwares that you might have used?
So currently we're using time zero. Time zero is a derivative, is a development from a previous software called Noveltech. We've had great success with this whole relationship for a number of years. In the last 3 years, we've had support from Time Zero. We're considered an ambassador for Time Zero. It is a software that is got a lot of tools in it. There's a lot of capability, particularly when it comes to the business of modeling a route. So if you're making a plan, and it's an offshore plan particularly, you can import a grid weather into the system, and if you know the performance parameters of your sailboat in terms of a performance profile, you can actually see a recommendation plotted out. Because we're busy going from port to port direct, it's a little hard, and we're coastal, it's a little hard to use that on a common regular basis. But the Time Zero also imports outside information. So we have AIS information, and it's graphically imposed. So our knowledge about traffic in the area is very, very supported. So we don't generally have a problem with knowing who's around us, what's around us. In yachting concentrated areas, that's a different matter. Not all the yachts carry the AIS.
And AIS being an identification system.
Right, yeah. So they transmit their position, we transmit our position. Anybody with that setup can either look at it ledger-like, or it can be represented graphically, and we're fortunate to have it graphically represented. And it's also on the radar. So radar is actually a great tool for after dark, noticing that there's someone in the area, and then you can go to the electronic chart and really get a better vision of where it is relative to your navigation.
Sure. This question just in from Paul Halley. Do you still use sextent to navigate?
Not on a regular basis. We carry it. We actually have we were the beneficiary of a retirement decommissioning of a Navy sub, the USS Baltimore. And years ago, they were carrying 3 sextants as training tools. And so when they decommissioned, they donated those sextants to the Pride. So we carry those sextants. We also have a plastic one so that we can really get into the business of not being concerned about
dropping on deck.
Everything. But we're so busy coastal, it's not a great opportunity, and we're busy with coastal weather and traffic, so it's not often getting used, and we don't use it in the Great Lakes, although that doesn't mean sextants can't be useful in Great Lakes, it's just we're not having to do it. And it's so convenient using the electronic stuff and the radar. Radar with ranges of 30 to 60 miles gives you a lot of plotting capability when low visibility occurs.
Sure. So,
but cross ocean, we have used it as a way of sort of being introduced to what that whole experience is like.
Something that I've heard you talk about before, what are the differences between navigation versus piloting?
Oh, well, piloting is the true navigation.
Yeah, that's it.
If I were to make a claim. If you cannot work horizontally, then, and in case vertically, for instance, you can do a distance off vertically with a sextant, which is like a lighthouse or a big mountain or something like that. But generally speaking, range bearing, ranges and how they work, and understanding how 2 objects in a straight line can represent something for yourself, and having multiples of that and seeing how they change. I mean, that's what the alignment is when you're in a channel. It's about keeping them and understanding what that looks like when you're getting a little bit off to one side and whether it's acceptable or not. That horizontal stuff, using a compass to establish it, understanding it with a radar, getting a 3 position or more, or two wide angle crossings. If you can't do that, and then of course there's the depth. There's a lot of information with depth. If you've got depth curves and you've got a depth finder, you can verify your position through the process of horizontal positioning information as well as do the depth thing, and you can sort of gain a greater confidence or a greater assurance It's just a check. And if you go by a buoy, don't not mark the chart.
Yeah, that's very true. Good morning for those of you that are just joining in. We are on episode 5 of Coffee with Captain. We have Captain Jan Miles here in front of the camera, Chief Mate Jeff Crosby behind the camera. This next question is coming from Corey down on Schooner, Virginia there. I just finished reading Endurance about Sir Ernest Shackleton's voyage to the Antarctic. Captain Miles, what's the farthest south you've sailed?
The Falkland Islands. Anybody know where they are? Actually, I was there before they became famous. I joined an English flagged 38-foot gaff ketch that had originally, that was over 50 years old at the time. This was in 1977-78. 2 English brothers were making a voyage, and they were looking for a third. And I wound up being asked, and I was happy to go. And so we left out of Antigua and sailed around to Rio. We thought it could be a 50-day trip. Turned out to be a 38-day trip. And then down through Argentina over to the other name for these islands is the Islas Malvinas. And we spent 5 weeks in the Falklands getting to know the English pub life. It's very, very English is the Falklands. Sure. But we also sailed around and got involved with a project with a fellow by the name of Throckmorton, who was famous in his day for underwater archaeology of shipwrecks. Oh. And he was sent by Maine State Museum to come down and recover portions of a square rigger ship called, I think it's the St. Mary. And we wound up being chartered to help him out do that. So we were using big chainsaws to cut up this massive downeaster into pieces that later wound up in the museum. But anyway, that was the Falklands.
What's the furthest south that the First Pride and this boat have been to?
Never south of the equator. They've only been in the northern hemisphere. And it would be the latitude that you have to go to when you're coming towards the Panama on the Pacific side or leaving the Panama on the Pacific side to go west. So when you come out of the canal, you're actually going a little bit further south before you start to go north or towards gain latitude again on your way to Hawaii. So that's as far south as she's ever been. On this side of the Americas, it would be the Venezuela area. Be as far south.
Cool. This question in from Antoine. Have you ever dealt with Canadian Coast Guard?
Well, okay, Coast Guard. They do the same kind of thing the American Coast Guard does when it comes to buoys and general soundings and chart and safety. But they have a different division, and that's Transport Canada. We've done a lot of work with Transport Canada, and that's because as a foreign flag vessel, if we're sailing in their national waters, we have to meet their regulations. But in terms of the Coast Guard, we haven't had a lot of dealings with because there's that separation. They're doing the general safety, whereas Transport Canada is about the regulatory safety. Mm-hmm. So we haven't had much to do with Coast Guard, but we have with Transport Canada.
Yeah, quite a bit with Transport Canada. So this is the point of the show where we're going to bring in a new face. We have second mate Siobhan Innes, who's going to join Captain Miles here.
Come on, Siobhan!
Good morning to those of you who are just joining in. We have Captain Jan Miles and second mate Siobhan Innes. Siobhan, you want to scoot over a little bit more?
Sure.
Great.
You've been with us a couple of times.
Yeah.
This is one, but another time a while ago. Introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your first time.
Okay. My name's Siobhan. I'm originally from Michigan, but I came back to sailing after living in Portland, Oregon for a while, building stuff out there.
Well, how'd you get into the traditional boats years ago when you joined us You come to Pride as a deckhand,
Uh-huh.
you have to have quite a bit of background. So how'd you get involved with these vessels back then?
Well, a little bit of dumb luck and blind faith. I had never sailed before, never been on a sailboat, and someone called me up and asked me if I wanted to work on a 100-year-old sword fishing schooner. I didn't know what that was, and they told me it was a tall ship, and I was like, oh, okay, that sounds fun. So I packed a bag and flew to New York and got on the Mary E. And my first day sailing was my first day working, and never been on a sailboat before. And we set all the sails, and I was standing up on the bow, and I was like, oh my god, this is exactly what I want to do with my life. And then I got hit in the head with a Stasa club and decided that I needed to learn what I was doing rather quickly. After that, I just wanted to keep sailing, so I went and got an Appledore up in Maine and sailed with Perry and Bethany. They actually taught me how to sail. Went to Key West, sailed down there, and started. My favorite part of sailing in Key West was the wreckers race. We'd race every month. And I really liked racing big old wooden boats.
Why do you like racing?
I like winning.
Well, no, there's more to it.
I like the yeah, no. I like the strategy. I like the athleticism, the teamwork. It's just like performing at your highest potential as a crew, as a boat. So I liked all that.
So what took you away from Key West?
Pride, actually. I had sailed with a former crew member, Krista Tyberski, on Appledore one winter, and she called me up and told me that y'all needed a deckhand.
Remind me of the year that you came to us.
2008.
Okay.
So I applied so I could come race Pride, and we did. We had a lot of great races that season.
So you've had a bit of a hiatus away from the world of sailing.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Well, actually, let me ask, where'd you go after Pride?
After Pride, I went. I went to South Carolina, skated some roller derby, and then I went to
roller derby.
Kind of like sailing.
And then, kind of. And then I went to South Street Seaport. It's the chief man and pioneer.
But you got out of the business and you started out on your own. You struck out on your own for a bit, right?
Yeah. Just went into carpentry, residential, commercial, and then I went into custom fabrication for retail.
You ran a company of your own for a while, right?
I flirted with that a little bit. Entrepreneurship.
But in that work, you were representing from a client how to get to where they wanted to go in a sense of putting on a show space, right?
Yeah, it was towards the end. I was doing a lot of quick turn, high profile events. So if Adidas was going to launch a new shoe, they would want to throw a huge party in New York or LA, and I would have 2 weeks to build everything for the party and ship it there and install it and then throw it away.
So you're working with a lot of other skilled people
Mm-hmm.
because of the materials that you're working with. And then you're dealing with logistics of moving it from place to place, assembly, disassembly.
Yeah. So somebody would make my furniture, somebody would make the scenic flats, somebody would source all of the things bought online, and then I would work with a bunch of different builders and a bunch of different logistics and make it all connect and show up.
That's a lot of management. So what's it like being second mate aboard Pride of Baltimore?
All right, everyone, we're back.
Hi.
We had a bit of technical difficulties there. My apologies. So carry on. I believe you again. Oh, there we are. Having some spotty connection issues. So talking about the second mate's role when it comes to safety gear and safety gear maintenance.
We have two different checks that we do. We have a monthly safety inspection and a quarterly safety inspection, and they're between 6 and 9 pages long, going through all of the equipment, visual inspection, keeping short, like.
So we're a 45 passenger vessel, so that means for total, it's not 45 passengers, 45 total inspected.
Yep.
And then because
lights, bells, and whistles.
and there are 19 on board for ocean passage work, and we're north of certain latitudes, we have immersion suit.
Mm-hmm.
So those have to be checked.
Yep.
And that's once a month, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So, and then of course there's making sure all the other fire extinguishers.
Yep. All the fire extinguishers.
11 fire extinguishers portable and 2 systems. They're all
EPIRBs,
unchanged
SARS.
from the last inspection. Okay, so what's that like?
Oh, it's super fun. I'm responsible for running the deck while the test and.
Well, you don't take command of the ship.
No,
right?
just the.
Well, describe that. So, how do you work as a leader of a watch? How do you manage not just the watch, but the whole process of fulfilling the business of sailing the boat or moving the boat over the period of the watch?
Mm-hmm. I have a very long list of variables in my head, and I just kind of run through that checklist, and then run through it again. And as variables change, I come and let you know.
Well, okay. So, do we have a ship standard that you at least start with in terms of how
orders? And I definitely reference those and just tell you. It's fun. Sometimes
I'm asleep, right?
Sometimes, yeah. So I try to only give you the more important things when you're sleeping. But if you're awake, I'll be like, oh, this cloud's bigger. Stars we've seen, or more importantly, sometimes it's cruise ships coming at us from different directions, and maybe a fishing boat over there, and this is when, where, and how they're going to pass us.
Is that okay, right? That's
Yeah.
what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Is my plan okay?
Yeah.
How do I respond?
Sometimes, we're all gonna die.
We seem to be having some spotty connection issues, so I think we're gonna wrap it up for this episode. Captain Miles, you have some departing words for us?
Stay diligent.